Mr Finn.
Thank you, Mr Acting President. I anticipate that I won't get the same response from the gallery, but nonetheless we go on. Now, that was quite a what I would describe as a Shing-esque performance, and I assure the House that I am not here to tell anyone that they are not worthy. I'm not here to tell anyone that they are disapproved of. I'm not here to condemn anyone. Not at all. There is one thing that I do agree with Ms Shing on, and that is this bill doesn't solve problems. Go along with that. In fact, it actually creates some. It creates some that we don't have now. So we have a bill here which is actually not going to solve anything, but is going to create some issues. To my way of thinking, that makes it bad legislation. Now, I readily accept that gender dysphoria is a condition, a genuine condition. I've known people with that, and that is a condition that should be dealt with sensitivity, with compassion, and most importantly, with medical professionalism. That is so important. But this bill does not do that. This bill does not do that at all. What this bill is about is not fixing an issue that people may have in terms of gender dysphoria, but indeed this is a part of the Labor Socialist government's much wider social agenda that we have seen over the past 5 years. And in pointing that out, I have to ask the question. I accept that some people may want to change their gender. Some people may find themselves in a situation where they feel that they're men when they're in a woman's body, or vice versa. But I have to ask the question, why would anybody want to do that every 12 months? Anybody who wants to do that every 12 months doesn't need medical attention, they need psychiatric attention. If you want to do that every 12 months, there's something wrong there. And any government that puts forward a law, a proposal to allow that, that too has major problems. Now, what this legislation does is to further legalise the fabrication of official documents. Now, this government's very good at that. We have already seen with the voluntary assisted dying legislation that death certificates are fabricated. If one were to take a box of poison that the government speaks about or spoke about during the debate on VAD, then that the death certificate would indeed not record what you died of, which would be the poison, but indeed the prior condition. So that is a fabrication, as indeed this would be. And of course we know that the government is very good at fabricating timesheets. As we have seen, you wouldn't know, would you? The government is very good at fabricating timesheets, and we're still waiting. We're still waiting on Victoria Police to adjudicate on that particular issue. Now, one of the issues that I am particularly concerned about is what will occur and what is occurring with children on the autism spectrum who are impacted by the push for transgender transition. And I want to refer to a magazine article, and I thank Ms MacArthur for her assistance in providing this. An article in Crisis magazine of December 12, 2016, and I just want to quote a couple of paragraphs from the article. It says, last May, Dr. Kathleen Levenstein, a professor of social work at the University of Michigan, wrote a heartbreaking piece about her autistic daughter, a teenage girl who had become convinced that she was really a man trapped inside a woman's body. With encouragement from transgender activists at the local organisation of PFL-AG, which is Parents, Families and Friends of Lesbians and Gays, the vulnerable young woman took sex-altering hormones and cut off her breasts. Dr. Livenstein now grieves the mutilation of her daughter's body and the increased psychological confusion her daughter is experiencing as a result of the hormones. She states she has been taken advantage of. Healthy organs were amputated. It is a crime not just against women, but particularly against disabled women. So many of these young women who are transitioning are also autistic. Now, you've got to realise that a part of the condition of autism is obsession. Once an idea has entered the head of a child who is on the spectrum, quite often it grows. The enthusiasm for the idea grows and continues to grow, and all logic is out the window. And I've seen that myself personally. I can certainly vouch for that. So we have a real situation where the sort of thing that we're talking about here today, the sort of thing that is being pushed in a lot of schools now, will have a major impact on children with autism and particularly on their families as well. And let me assure you that autistic kids and their families have more than enough on their plate without the sort of pressures that we are talking about. I stand here today as somebody who puts the concerns, puts the interests of families with autism very, very high on my agenda, very, very high on my priority list, and that is one of the reasons that I cannot support this legislation. And I'm very hopeful that that members listening to my words today will also take that into consideration when they are deciding which way they will vote on this bill. Now, Mr O'Donoghue made comment of Ms Staley's comments in the Assembly, the member for Ripon's comments in the Assembly. And as members would know, Ms Staley and I have had we don't always agree on social issues. I think it'd be safe to say that we have had a degree of separation on certain issues. But in this regard, on this particular matter, we are as one. Not necessarily for the same reasons, but we are as one. And I can understand Ms Staley's views, and I can understand the views of other women. Now, I have 3 daughters at home, and one of the main jobs that I have as a dad is to protect them. That is one of my main jobs is to protect my daughters. And I'm voting today to protect them. I do not want somebody who claims to be a woman, a man who claims to be a woman, to get a birth certificate which says that he is a woman. I don't want him to get that birth certificate and use that as a way to molest women, to molest young girls, as some will inevitably will. You can put the house on it. Some will. I do not want that to happen, and I won't support that. I won't support the bill in this way, because that is inevitably what will happen. There are sex fiends out there who will go to any lengths. They will go to any lengths to advance their own obscene needs, if I can put that in inverted commas. So we have a proposal here today, which, as far as I'm concerned, is going to put my daughters in danger. So I'm not going to support that. I'm not going to support that. You know, we heard from Mr O'Donoghue before about competing rights. And in this particular situation, we most surely have a situation of competing rights. And let me tell you, I am going to support the rights of my daughters and their friends to live a life free of molestation or sexual assault. I think that is only fair and reasonable, and indeed the only decent and honourable thing to do. Now I'm going to be controversial here, if I could, just for a moment. Here in Victoria, it's very hard to be controversial because anything goes under Daniel Andrews. Anything's possible. But let me tell you that science tells us, and members opposite are very big on telling us what science tells us about a whole range of things. Science tells us there are two genders. There is male and there is female. There are two genders. Let me tell you, there are two genders. If Ms Cumming thinks she's something else, well, good luck to her. I've got a fair idea of what Ms Cumming is, but it's got nothing to do with the gender. But there are indeed two genders, and for this government to be pushing a social agenda which wants to set up 78 or 129 or 300 different genders is an attack on our society. In fact, that's what it is. You know, if you want to quote science, well then you'll back that up. There are two genders. Now, of the two genders, of the male, there's homosexual inclination and various paedophilic inclinations, a whole range of inclinations, and we could go on to that for quite some time. But in terms of gender, there are only two genders, male and female. And there is nothing that this government can do. There is nothing that this government can do to change that. You can sit here around the clock 365 days a year passing legislation every day and you will not change the fact that there are only two genders. Simple as that. You can't do it because that is what science tells us. Now, I have received, as I'm sure we all have, an enormous number of emails on this particular legislation, and the overwhelming number have been against it. That doesn't surprise me. That doesn't surprise me greatly. Clearly, there has been an organised push from both sides, and that's a good thing for democracy. I think, you know, when people send their views to their elected members, I think that's a very, very good thing. But there is another way. There is another way that has often been talked about in the media, and there's this thing called the pub test. And I just asked the question, do you reckon this bill would pass the pub test? Do you reckon, you know, if you walked into any pub in Footscray, for example, if you walked into any pub in Footscray and you said that this government has put forward legislation to the Victorian Parliament which says that you can change your gender every 12 months if you want to, and you can be anything you want. You can be anything you want. What do you reckon the people around the bar would say? What do you think the people around the bar would say? I think they'd be appalled. I think they would be appalled, and I think certainly the ones out in my electorate, they would say, well, the government has gone completely insane. The government has gone completely insane, and indeed they would be right. They would be absolutely right. This is just quite extraordinary. I mean nobody any ill will. I hope that people are able to live their lives as much as they want to, and I certainly, as I said right at the very beginning, I'm not here to tell anybody that they're unworthy or unloved or anything else. Quite the opposite. But I have thought through this quite thoroughly, I can assure you. And for the reasons that I have outlined today, I will be opposing the bill. This is a very important piece of legislation. The bill passing today will be a matter of great regret for us for many years to come. if indeed that were to occur, and I urge the House to reject this legislation for that reason.